Okay, I'm going to jump right off. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for making the time to join us today for the Go2-Insightz Webinar with Borderless Access. I'm really glad and really pleased to be able to welcome Iberi from Borderless Access and Lynn, who many of you know is currently Research Manager, Spark Media. And today they're going to be sharing some really great insights and information from their Go2-Insightz survey, which is available on Telmar, and we'll discuss that later as well. But specific focus on the South African consumers post-COVID. And I'm personally looking forward to some of the insights around, those shifts in priorities and what's really going on in the consumer minds in terms of what people's priorities are. So we'll see that coming up as well. So we'll take about 40 minutes of your time, and we do welcome any questions. But if you could, the presenters have asked if you could please put your questions into specifically the Q&A button on the bottom right-hand side of your screen and leave those questions there, and they will address all of the questions at the end of the session, and we'll be able to go through each one of those questions and they'll answer those for you. So we will also be making the presentation available to you afterwards. There'll be a video which will compile, so within the next week or so, you'll be able to have access to both the video and the presentation. So again, thank you for joining us. If you want to chat, please use the chat box. Feel free to say hi to everybody around us. And yeah, questions and answers or questions, please post in the Q&A section as well. But thank you very much for joining us. And I'm going to hand over to Lynn and to Iberi.
Thank you very much, Marsha. So just go to the next slide and introduce ourselves. My name is Iberi Ije, and I'm the Associate Director for Business Development in Africa at Borderless Access.
And hi, I'm Lynn Krog, and I've been working in market research for more years than I care to remember. And those are my credentials.
Great, welcome guys.
Thank you very much. Next, moving on. So today we are really excited to be introducing to you from Borderless Access our newly launched consumer intelligence tracking tool called Go2-Insightz. And aside from information on the solution, we'll also be sharing with you some insights on the SA consumer post-COVID. Would like to find out whether or not there needs to. Okay, next slide. So today's agenda will first be introducing to you the solution, and then we will then share features about the solution and then what makes this not just another industry insight solution. And then we will talk about the post-COVID SA consumer, and then we will then share some sector insights and stories about the SA consumer post-COVID. And then we'll take a look at the dashboard, and then we'll take your questions after the presentation. But before I go straight into the solution Go2-Insightz, just for the benefit of people who aren't aware of who we are at Borderless Access and what we do, I'll just do a brief introduction. So we are a digitally and tech-enabled end-to-end market research agency, and we are one of the pioneers of online panels globally. And then currently in South Africa, we have over 300,000 panelists, and just making the distinction between panelists and a database. So panelists, so those are people who are highly engaged and they're highly profiled, and we're constantly engaging them, collecting information and generating numerous data points on these people. So we know who they are, we know what they do, we know how best to identify them, how best to reach them. So I'll just share with you some of the features of Go2-Insightz, and bearing in mind that it is on the massive resource which we have in panel in South Africa, which is our proprietary panel that we have created the solution Go2-Insightz. And basically the solution is aimed at providing you with impactful and current consumer insights that enables you to understand the markets in a way that is timely. And that is the key word here, that it is timely, because we do recognize that in times like this where things are constantly shifting, that is important that you have data that is actually representative of the present reality, as opposed to waiting for very long data. So this continuous intelligence tracking tool will provide you with up-to-date information on consumer attitudes and behavioral patterns, and it will also help you to identify trends, and you'll be able to see an understanding of your markets and consumer Presently, we're covering over 35 top-level sectors and over 54 subcategories with over 100 topics explored within that. And we've also captured over 1,000 brands within the scope of the study. And just to note that it is representative of over 36 million online South African consumers. And to ensure the relevancy of this data, we make sure to collect the data every quarter. So the data is collected every quarter throughout the year. And the beauty of this is that you'll then be able to see, indicative trends and behavioral patterns and profiles of the markets and data in real time. So what we do is after each quarter of data collection, immediately the data has been collected, it is made immediately available on an intuitive and very easy to use online dashboard. And from the dashboard, you'll be able to perform standard analysis, and then you'll also be able to export stories and data from that dashboard into your own presentations in whatever format that you might want to choose. And finally, this is a very comprehensive solution. And obviously, with the way we are collecting the data, which is very regular and continuously, we have still introduced this product into the market at a very competitive price. So for 64,900 Rand, you'll be able to have access to all of the categories and all of the information that has been captured on the Go2-Insightz platform. Okay. Sorry, Lynn, if you could just take us to the screen, this shows all of the categories and sectors which we have covered so that I could just, yeah. Thank you very much, yeah. So within the solution, you'll be able to uncover profiling and explore attributes and behavior across all of the sectors which you're able to see on the screen. And so from your non-alcoholic beverage to your personal care, to banking, to pets, it's diet and wellness, you basically be able to understand your target segment, and so you know what influences them, how they shop, how they're shopping, what is important to them, and so on. And also provides you key questions to your brand metrics, such as brand preference, purchase drivers, monthly spend, decision making, and all of that. And in addition to this, you'll also have access to demographic and psychographic information. So you have attitudes and aspiration that enables you to track the state of the SA consumer, for example, as well as the impact of COVID. And you'll be able to track all of these things over time within the solution. Okay, Lynn, you can go ahead to the next slide. So here is a basic example of some of the information that has been covered under the retail segment. So in this segment, you'll find information that has to do with what are the categories that people are purchasing, more often, and then what are the roles of people in the household with regards to decision making. You'll be able to see that kind of information, and then you understand what's brand preference choices people are making and avoidance as well. So you'll be able to understand what stores people are shopping at, what stores are they typically avoiding to shop at, and then what kind of loyalty programs are they subscribed to, or what store accounts do they have, and what are their opinions and perceptions on this kind of programs. And then you also have an understanding, for example, on what kind of purchase people are making. Say, are they making impulse purchases? What products are they making impulse purchases on? And what products are they actually putting more thoughts planning into before making a purchase? So this basically just highlights some of the information that can be captured under a particular category or segment. Okay. So we will go to the design of the solution and look at the backbone of the solution in a bit more detail. So as I mentioned earlier, we are one of the founders of online panels globally, and we do have a considerable strength across developing markets. And for South Africa, it means that our panel started in 2011 November. Online panels available, and it has 4 to 10, and it reaches across cities, towns, and in some instances rural areas as well. So basically, in urgent insight needs that you might have as well. Okay, go to the next slide. Okay, this map here shows a visual representation of our panel reach, and what we're trying to show is the excellent coverage and distribution of the online panel across South Africa. So despite this being an online panel, you're able to see that the distribution is not skewed to certain areas. And our team over the years have put in a lot of work to ensure this representativeness. And the great thing about this map is when you juxtapose it alongside that for face-to-face, you will notice that the variation isn't highly significant. And another great advantage of the online panel is the fact that you're able to hear directly from the consumer without the intervention of an interviewer or a third party. And so what this does is eliminates any form of bias that might arise from having that presence. And then you know that the insight that being generated is actually much more authentic. Okay, next slide. So here we have the demographic breakdown of respondents by age, gender, race, location, LSM and SEM, so your standard basic demographic information. And this has been weighted to the online population of South Africa of over 36 million. And we also have information on people's household and personal income. And interestingly enough, we do find that people are actually much more willing to share the information on their personal income when they're on online panels as opposed to other methods. And like I mentioned, we have weighted this to the online population of South Africa using March to PAMS 2020. Okay, go to the next slide. Okay, in terms of the frequency in which we are collecting the data for Go2-Insightz, like I mentioned earlier, the data is collected and reported every quarter. So every quarter we're collecting throughout the year continuously, we are collecting data. However, for certain categories, we're collecting this information biannually. So categories such as medical health, education, technology, and the likes are collected on a biannual basis because these areas don't experience a lot of change within the segments. So we collect this biannually. But for the other sectors and segments, we are collecting this every quarter. And then for the sample that we are working with, we've ensured that we are working with a very robust sample. So for instance, for your demographic and psychographic information, we have up to 5,000 completes each quarter. And then for categories which are collected quarterly, we're achieving up to 3,000 completes per quarter. And then another thing that's interesting to note is that we have ensured that we're doing sector-specific questionnaires. So what this does is, as opposed to a respondent answering a very, very long number of questionnaires, they're able to answer questionnaires for a particular sector. And what this eliminates is, issues with respondent fatigue and, recurring answers that people would typically just give when they are, they need to go through a very long survey. Okay.
Okay.
Go to the next slide. Yeah, I think at this point, I'll hand over to Lynn to take us through some very interesting insights on the data that has been uncovered from this solution, and we'll take questions after this. After that.
Thanks, Adira.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you. Okay, so let's have a look at some of this exciting data. I think the most exciting thing for me about this data as a user of it is the time element. So I think all of us are very frustrated, and COVID has brought about this phenomenon where we know that behavior has changed, but there's no up-to-date data to tell us how it's changed. And what this data does, it's not a snapshot of 1 year or 2 years, it's actually a snapshot of a quarter. And you can start to see how sentiment is changing. So with that in mind, I want to showcase just a few of the insights that we're seeing in the data. So I like to think of, we're looking at 2 quarters of data here. The end of last year, which I like to think of as the dying days of COVID, but people were still very worried about COVID because Omicron had just reared its head. And I like to think that South Africa actually conquered COVID. And then we went into the beginning of this year, which it's almost like pre-mask end of COVID. And people were far more relaxed. It was almost like it was a thing of the past. So we're looking at the period pre-Christmas COVID to post-Christmas, pre-Easter almost. We're looking at summer moving into a very cold, wet autumn, which was quite unusual for us. And we're looking at an era of, interestingly, where COVID was the number 1 concern to now COVID being the number 2 or 3 concern, and load shedding rearing its head, and also the state of the economy, price increases, and also confidence in the government. So that's the sort of era that we're talking about. So we want to see how behavior has changed with that backdrop. The first thing we just look at, we're sort of getting hints of in terms of e-commerce. So what happened during COVID was that people started to use online shopping because they had to, they couldn't get to the shops as much. So they experimented with it. So what happened is that you got an experimentation and a surge in that behavior. What's happening now as we move into this year, sort of post-COVID, is that people are going back to the shops more, and there's a reduction in online purchases of certain categories. Okay. In terms of personal care, we saw more purchases of body creams and lotions. That could very much be a change in the weather. We're not sure. We'd need to watch that to see how it would change annually. Retail habits are interesting. So we saw a lot of people are claiming to be buying more in terms of alcohol, tech, also grocery items, and also spending more, but that could be because of an increase in prices. But definitely, despite the worry about money and income, more activity happening out in the market. We look at diet and wellness. This is very interesting. So I think during COVID, there was a lot of good intentions. People wanted to eat more healthily. They wanted to exercise more, and they wanted to be more mindful. What's happening post-COVID is that we're seeing a drop-off in quite a few of these activities or intentions. So, for example, sugar reduction has gone from 44% pre to 33% post. And what's happening as well is that a lot of people were claiming to use techniques to reduce stress and anxiety pre-COVID. And that's also dropping off a little bit as we get back into the real world. Travel, obviously one of the biggest hit industries. We're seeing people are traveling more, but this is almost pre the big price hikes in air travel. So we need to see the next quarter's data and the next quarter's data to see how these price hikes have impacted how much people are traveling. But certainly what we have seen is that more people are claiming to buy economy tickets and also using cheaper accommodation like bed and breakfasts, or maybe even staying with friends and family. How is all of this being financed? Well, I suppose of some concern is the fact that we're seeing more people using credit cards. So whether the price increases or just the travel or buying more stuff post-COVID, the credit card is being bent. All people are actually taking out secondary bank accounts in order to get more credit cards or more credit extended to them. So that's also something that needs to be watched. What about the general mindset of South Africans pre and post-COVID? We're a resilient bunch. So as I said before, we've got a lot to worry us. COVID was pre-Christmas, but now there's load shedding and there's all sorts of other stuff. Despite all of that, 46% of people say that they're mostly happy. When we have a look at the emotions around work and the emotions around home life, you can see that stress is evident in both, but around work, there's more anxiety. Around home, there's more happiness and feelings of fulfillment. There has been a slight increase in feelings of anxiety, stress, and anger from the end of last year to the beginning of this year. And when we have a look at what's causing that, it's no surprise, if you have a look down the bottom there, what are South Africans' biggest focus, which are the little blue numbers, and what are their biggest concerns? The red numbers. Finances by far the biggest focus and by far the biggest concern. And that figure is taking the full 2 quarters of data. When you have a look at the quarter on quarter, both of those have increased significantly. So finance is the concern area for a lot of people. All the other focuses and concerns you can see are far lower. Okay. I love this slide. So what are South Africans prioritizing and what are they aspiring to? So if you have a look at the little spider diagram down the bottom, where we've got the dark blue shape, which is showing us what consumers' priorities are currently. And you can see the 2 biggest places where we're pulling out on family and work. So family and work are what take up most of people's time. That's the priority. Obviously, with financial problems, work is going to be there, but it's really good to see family up there as well. If you look at the light blue diagram, or the light blue line, that shows what people's future priorities are. And it's a little bit like looking at a New Year's resolution list. We always want to, our priority for the future is we're going to learn something new. We're going to start exercising. Really, we're going to start exercising. We're going to start practicing spirituality and doing more to think about our mental health and our relaxation. And yes, leisure time is going to be there, but socializing is not pulling out as much as we think. That changes with age groups. So younger people will be more into the socializing than the older people. But that's the beauty of this. You can look at it by different demographics as well. How are people spending their luxury time while socializing and leisure? What's really good to see is if we have a look at the right-hand side there, what is more important to people since COVID and what is less important to people since COVID? This is what they're claiming. And we get family and mental health both coming out very strongly. So the importance of family, the importance of actually keeping ourselves sane and not worrying too much about life have become more important since COVID. What's become less, and obviously money, what's become less important? Well, social relationships, national politics and the economy, and going to big sports outings, because those are things that you couldn't do, but they're not as important as they were before. When we have a look at carrying that information through to the next slide, what I want to show you here is it's quite a busy slide, but if you just have a look at the left-hand side, where we have the light blue and the dark blue bars. So the dark blue bars are showing us the percentage of people who are saying that that element has actually become better since COVID. The light blue bars are showing us the percentage of people who say that that element has become worse since COVID. So what we're seeing here is that for family time, 35% of people are saying, my family time's better now since COVID. 20% are saying, my family time's worse since COVID. So it's a net gain, if you like. The blue bar, dark blue bar is bigger than the light blue bar. So which things have had a net gain during COVID? And it's family time and family relationships. Those two are both colored green. What that means is that those two elements, as I've shown you in the previous slide, have become more important to people since COVID. So it's almost like the whole experience of being locked down with the family and having something, I guess, that ultimately could kill you if you got it, has made family relationships actually closer. And that's something that people have held onto, even with the advent of COVID not becoming such a priority. Okay, which is a good thing. If we have a look at the carry on going down the bars, you can see at the bottom where the light blue bars are bigger than the dark blue bars. Those are things that have had a net negative influence. And you can see right at the very bottom, 50% of people saying that their income is worse since COVID, which is a worry, which is why we're seeing such stress and anxiety around income and finances, particularly with the inflation that we're seeing in our grocery basket and our gas prices at the moment. And that when we get the next quarter's data, which should be coming out very soon, you're probably going to see an increase in this, an even bigger increase in this going forward. Okay. What's interesting to note here as well is that while physical health has remained sort of fairly better and worse, you can see 24% of people actually, their health is better since COVID, probably because they put in some effort to make themselves healthier because of the scare, and then an equal number being worse since COVID. If you have a look further down to mental health, I think that's where the biggest impact has happened. And mental health is more important to people now since COVID. So it's something that needs to be focused on and something that people are thinking about. If we look at the right-hand side, what are South Africans doing more of and what are they doing less of since COVID? And you can see it's all good habits. So cooking, time with the immediate family, watching TV, maybe not so much. But what's interesting is that all of these things have remained high. So it's not like they've actually declined from the end of last year to the beginning of this year, since COVID's not so much of a threat. Whereas if you have looked down at the bottom, those are things that people were doing less of, and they're coming back again. So they were the things that they're doing less of, but they're getting back into them gradually, slowly. Okay. So that was just a little bit of general information about the state of where people are in terms of their mindset. But now I want to just showcase one sector. So you saw all the sectors that Abere showed us. So there are many, many sectors that you can dive into and get this level of information from. So the sector that we're looking at is actually alcohol consumption. And I had a few bits and pieces there in alcohol, because people really loved alcohol during lockdown. And actually you started to see that the banning of alcohol probably had a completely opposite effect. It almost made people start to consume more. But let's unpack the sector a little bit to show you the types of information that you're able to get from all of the sectors, or most of the sectors that are collected within the survey. So you've got your drivers. So your drivers for alcohol consumption are basically around socialization, relaxation, and taste. How's it happening? Mostly at home. But even at home, it's more of a social thing, with only a few people, or 18%, drinking on their own. And what's interesting to note is that your consumption is quite polarized, with a third of people only having 1 to 3 units a week, but an equal proportion having at least 8 units a week. So probably drinking every night. And as you can imagine, most people are very satisfied with and content with their alcohol consumption, as it is with any habit like that. Okay. If we have a look at what people are purchasing, so what is the main beverages, and we can see wine and ready to drink, which is your ciders, coming up, beer, gin, whiskey, how much they're spending, and also what forms of advertising they're aware of. So television and Facebook coming up strongly, and then where they're buying from, the main places of purchase. So you can just see the depth of information that's available, and this depth of information is available at a quarterly, so you can start to see how things are moving and changing. And then within certain sectors, there's a lot of brand information. So the top brands are collected. So you can see our top beers, whiskies, gins, and ready to drinks within the category. And then something which is pretty neat, you can actually do a little bit of a segmentation. So we've developed category personas here, which look at the SKUs by the different types of alcohol drinkers. And I'm sure all of us who are listening can actually find ourselves within this chart, within this slide. So your beer drinkers, you can see the picture sums it up perfectly. Mostly males, you're quite heavy drinking, and it's a sociable thing, but also in the home. And then I fit nice and neatly into that second category, that old lady drinking red wine at home, which I do every night with my partner, who fits very neatly into the last segment, and he drinks whiskey every night. So you can see how it all works. It works pretty accurately. It's giving a very accurate picture. Then you get your cider drinking, which is also more female and in that sort of young to middle age group. And wine and cider consumers, they're more inclined to 1 to 3 drinks a week and mostly drink at home. And it's also very much a de-stressor. And then gin, which obviously has had a big resurgence in the last few years, but very social, and also a little bit younger. But yeah, it gives you a very nice idea in terms of how the data can be used, and there's lots of information. This is one category, and you saw how many categories are actually collected. Okay, so how to access the insights? Well, there's a very, very nice intuitive dashboard that's available when you invest in the data. You literally, there's screens like this which you can filter by many demographics, and it's going to give you the picture changes based on what you're filtering the data on. It's very, very easy to use. And then obviously all of us here are survey time users, so which is how I like to look at data, and it is available on survey time. So what happens is that quarterly the data set is updated, and there's a wave marker there, so you can actually analyze all the data within one data set, which is quite handy. And each sector or category has its own section, so you can go in and analyze each sector. Okay, I've been having a lot of fun with it. I'm such a nerd, having fun with data, but I'm sure lots of people.
You're not alone. You're not alone.
So you can have lots of fun with this data. There's a lot of stories to unpack. Okay. Basically, just in conclusion, in terms of what we're seeing. So yes, there is increased happiness because of the end of COVID, but there are a lot of stresses that are happening within the country, and most of it currently is around personal finances. At the beginning of the year, there was a positive outlook for the retail landscape, with more people getting back into shopping, especially in store. And we need to watch and see whether that actually continues. What's very good to notice is that the family and mental health, there's some very good habits and some very good lifestyle priorities that have been embraced as a result of COVID and kept as a result of COVID. So we need to always hang on to the positive, and hopefully that family cohesion and importance will actually help us get through the rest of this year, which I think is going to be pretty tough. Okay. So I think I've sort of touched on a few things. So will these behaviors carry on being adopted going on? We need to have a look at the data and see. And let's talk. So what do you guys think? So now what I'd like to do is just open it up for any questions. And I'll hand over to you, Marcia. I think you've got okay.
Great. Well, thank you very much. That was really awesome. It was really good to see some people taking up the cooking habits that I've also taken up, although that hasn't led to any kind of decrease in size. But anyway, but yeah, it's really great to see those shifts, and especially kind of, the mindsets and where people are moving to. And, we always tend to generalize from our own experiences, but I think it's great to be able to see something coming from, research that really kind of cements ideas or cements thoughts, or just gives you, a different take on what your worldview is. So thank you very much for that. Just on the questions and answers, I've got over here one from Ginny saying, do you have insights on general mindsets and specifically stress by region? Remember, you were talking about that stress with, in terms of people's stress. Example, KZN versus Gauteng versus Western Cape, which obviously might be quite different given what's going through in those areas.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, yes, we do. So we have the data regionally, so you would be able to look at it by region. Also, you get within the data, there's a lot of attitudinal questions. So you get the Myers-Briggs, the Myers-Briggs personality groupings, which is really interesting as well. So you can start looking at mental attitude by personality type as well, and what personality type dominates by age group area. So we've literally touched the tip of the iceberg here.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so just to specify, like, some with regards to general mindsets, type of information that you'll be able to see coming through. I think some of that came through in the earlier slide, which Lynn talked on. So you'd see concerns and worries, and you'd see people's emotions with regards what emotions they have at home and what emotions they have, when they're at work as well. And then you see what their lifestyle attributes are, as well as what their priorities and their values are, as well as concerns, obviously, and where their life focus is. So that kind of granular information with regards to their attitudes and aspiration is available. And of course, like Lynn said, you'd be able to view all of that by region and province when you dissect on the dashboard.
Just to add in there, it's very interesting when you start looking at the focuses and the priorities by age group. You do see fairly significant differences there. So whereas and by male, female as well. So your younger age group obviously has not obviously, but the priorities more are around education, socializing as well, because they're getting out. And I think from a mental their mental well-being, they were probably the group that was most hard hit during COVID because they weren't able to socialize and it's such an important part of their lives because they're getting out and they're meeting people. That's what you do. So yes, sorry, that was just a little aside. I was remembering something I saw in the data.
Great, thank you very much. I've got a next question here from Letitia saying it's interesting that what is less important since COVID is the economy, whilst COVID had a huge impact on the economy. So how could, where does that kind of response come from, or, what influences that kind of response?
Do you know what? It's probably a case of we've got lockdown now. We can't worry about the economy. It's too big a thing. Let's worry about the things that are affecting us immediately. So what's affecting us immediately is lockdown, is inflation, and so what happens is that the economy and the government actually just becomes something that's there, not realizing that it's actually the concern of the cause of everything that's going on. So it's bigger matters, and that's the reason why you would have seen it go down slightly.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the economy talks to the broader economy as opposed to what's impacting me on a day-to-day basis, income, expenditures, etc. Yeah,
exactly. It's far more immediate, as we all know as South Africans. I mean, lockdown is an immediate thing that's happening to me. The food of the cost of my grocery basket is something that's immediate. So let's worry about getting through that. The things that we maybe can influence by buying slightly less or buying slightly cheaper. I saw a very good article yesterday about how our grocery basket size is declining. So our budget is the same, so we're just buying less and probably buying more, looking for specials more.
Great. And on costs, we have a question from Debbie saying, I missed the mention on costs per month. Could you remind us? So there was no cost per month, but yeah, Iberi?
Okay, yeah, so the cost isn't per month, so it's an annual subscription. So it's an annual subscription at 64,900 Rand. So when you subscribe annually, it's for access to all of the categories which we have displayed. So you'll be able to have access to all of the categories and all of the information which have been displayed, as well as access to the Go2-Insightz dashboard.
Great. And then we'll have our contact details after as well, so you can always just send any of those questions with regards to cost and what you get access to Iberi after this as well. Then we have another question saying, sorry, you might have missed this, but what are the demographics and sample size of the report you just showed?
Demographics. Okay, so the sample size. So the data that I was showing you is based on 2 quarters of data, and the demographics covers like 16,000 interviews. The category data I was showing you for alcohol is about 6,000 interviews, 3,000. So the way that the sampling works is that we don't ask everybody every single category, because that would just exhaust everybody and nobody would answer. And we all know, you literally, when you ask people survey questions nowadays, you keep it short and simple so that you get good quality answers. So the way that it works is that panelists will go in, everybody answers the demographics, that's always on, that's there. But then you go in and you answer certain categories, and you will answer the alcohol category. Okay. Maybe next month or next quarter or next year, you might go in and answer the grocery category. So you've got a situation where you almost have individual separate samples for every single category. So sample sizes, so when you're going in and analyzing this data, you're looking at like really good, decent sample sizes for every single category, and those decent sample sizes go from quarter to quarter. It's a little bit different if you guys are used to looking at the big landscape studies that we have out there, where it's mostly single source, where you have like 10,000 interviews and everybody gets asked every question. So they must be answering questions for about 2 hours to get to the end of it. But so what's happening here is that because of the agility of the panel, you're able to answer categories, collect data quickly, and make the data available quickly. But the integrity of the samples are there. So every sample is weighted to be representative of the online South Africa, which is about 30 million people. Does that answer the question, I hope?
I think it does, and there are a few more from, and I think it's pronounced Siren. Apologies, it's not correct. There was a question around, can custom reports be made? For example, if we're doing work for a client and we need insights from a specific target market around the specific topics. And then also, how long does a custom study take, and costs we've covered already. So I think that talks more to being able to get custom reports from yourselves and getting custom studies made as well.
Yeah, sure. So if you recall, there was a slide which we showed earlier, which showed our proprietary panel. And basically, when I talked about that slide, I mentioned our ability and the readiness that we have to answer, custom questions and to do custom reports. So one of the great things that we're able to do the great thing about our panel is the fact that we're able to, bring out agile solutions and reports. So I see that she's asking for how long it will take. So of course, we'll be able to use the panel to address specific questions that you have from a particular segment. And then because of the agility of the panel and our solutions, typically we're looking at about 5 days, depending on the target audience and segments, as well as the incidence of the request. And so, but to a larger extent, we will look at typically 5 days to get out a custom study.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I don't see any further questions coming through on the Q&A. I don't know if anybody has anything that they quickly want to type in. But if not, if you can go to the next slide, our contact details are there. So from a Telmar perspective, please feel free to drop me a mail. It's mswat@telmar.com, and from a Borderless Access point of view, you can also contact Iberi on her email address or at connect@borderlessaccess.com.